Welcome everyone to another episode of the Hector Mike Experience, Common Sense in an Uncommon World. And this past week, you've got what we're seeing in a lot of different communications, newspapers, social media. It's being called the Biden panic. You've got a lot of individuals within the Democratic Party, including Axelrod, who was Barack Obama's campaign manager, and Barack Obama himself, who have been going out into the press and just kind of raising some questions. Axelrod, was out. David Axelrod was out talking about President Biden and whether he should be considering bowing out of his reelection bid. And his comments was, "Look, the approval ratings are very, very dark, um, and that's a very dark news for this campaign." And then you had Barack Obama telling the Wall Street Journal, um, he says, Obama indicates that this thing is going to be close, feels Democrats are very well close to losing, um, and so it's sending up the trial balloons, folks, out to the Democratic Party, and whether it's two things, it's indicating that he should step out, or that or trying to coalesce the Democrats around him. But I mean, the poll numbers are showing right now that Joe Biden is at a 36% approval rating. I saw one of them that showed that Kamala Harris had a 1% approval rating higher than he did.
That's what
Uh,
caused the panic.
and the other thing too is they're showing minorities are
Big
and
time.
mind you, they're losing favor with Biden. And here's the thing: is you may look at a poll and say, okay, well, 46% of minorities still want to be with Biden, and you've got another percentage that don't know, another percentage that can care less, and then Republicans that are at 40% or 30%. Those are big numbers because at the end of the time, especially with elections, is you don't have to win 50 plus one for every single voter segment. You have to win 50 plus one with all the voter segments put together. So you can lose women at a certain percentage. You can lose people who make a certain income at a percentage, but it all comes back to is how do you put place everything together. And so even with Hispanics, when you've got Donald Trump who getting out 35 to 36%, that was a big number, and
Huge number.
it looks like it's growing there.
I just laugh because I think it was that number with Kamala Harris that sent them into a panic. Oh my God, and because people up until now people ask the question, should she be the one replaced on the ticket? So now his ratings are lower than hers. So maybe they're asking, is he the one that should be replaced on the ticket? But I think if you take a little bit deeper dive into this, um, there's a couple of things happening. One, I think what Obama is doing is sending up the red flag or sending up the alert. Um, that this is real, that we need to get our people coalesced behind this president. Polls are a snapshot in time. But the other thing that people need to understand, and I've seen this over and over, is that an election is between two people.
Mhm.
It's not you running against yourself. And I remember this from 2012, believe it or not, when I was at the RNC and I remember sitting in a strategy meeting, and this was long before Mitt, had become the nominee. There was still a battle going on. And I sat in the strategy meeting and someone, one of these strategy experts said, well, we've got an opportunity, to win black voters because they're not happy with President Obama's performance. And I thought I had said in my inside voice, but it wasn't. What are you fucking crazy? I mean, he's the first black president. What makes you think you're going to win black voters? They're not going to leave this guy. I mean, maybe they're not happy, but they're not going to leave this guy. It all depends on who you're running against, and that's where it comes down to. So, is there a panic? I don't know if there's a panic. I think what there is a dome of that happens in Washington D.C. And I'll cite one specific example for everybody on that. Right before Thanksgiving, when the president left to go to I think Delaware for Thanksgiving, he had a meeting in the Oval with some of his political people and the people that work for him at the White House. And he kind of dressed them down a little bit, according to the reports, about how they weren't getting their message out about the economy and stuff like that, and said they needed to do better. Well, the fact of the matter was, what that said to me was there's a tone deafness that's there. It's not them not doing their job. It's when, Katrina Jean Pierre stands there and says how great the economy is, and people are like, what planet are you on? That's where the disconnect is. She's doing what she's supposed to do, which is spout the company line, but people aren't buying it. And they're not buying it because every single day they're reminded about how tough their life is compared to what it used to be, how much more expensive it is, and how scared they are that they're not going to be able to afford the basics in life. And so I think that's one of the problems that they have, is that they can tout all the numbers they want.
Right.
Yeah, okay, there's more people working than there was when he took over. Well, there was a goddamn pandemic when he took over. Okay? I
Yeah.
mean, people, unemployment was up in the 30% mark for a while because of COVID. I mean, yeah, it's better than it was when you took over because, a third of the country wasn't working because everybody was home and scared out of their wits that they were going to die. So, you know, you want to tout that, go ahead and tout it. But that doesn't do any good for the people today that have to pay more for chicken and steak and turkey and gas and heating oil and insurance and everything else that comes with your everyday life. And there's that disconnect right now that's taking place between these people in Washington and the people out here that are having to deal with real life every day.
Yeah, and that you're right. That becomes the big disconnect, and I think it becomes important, especially for these communications folks. What really and really for the because it's a campaign, right? It's they're out there promoting their guy because they want him to win re-election. But there's a when you have the disconnect between the message and the facts, there are two really separate things, and the most powerful is when you message based on the facts you've got. I mean, and the thing too is they can go out there and be honest and say, look, we know people are hurting. We know inflation is up. We know people are having a difficult time. But here's some of the things that we've done and here's some of the things that we're looking to do to try to make things easier. I mean, they can go out there and say, and Biden has moved himself around, kind of twisted himself in the pretzel on the border situation. I mean, you had Kamala Harris out 2 days ago talking about, yes, we need border protection. Well, they have the ability to go out there because they control the bully pulpit. They control the mics. If the president were to call a press conference on border security, the cameras would be there, and he could say, "Look, I'm looking at the same images everyone else is looking at. I am looking at the same numbers everyone's looking at. In December, it's estimated that we may have between 250 to 300,000 people that are apprehensions at the border."
Mm-hmm.
And he can go out there and say, and we will have no more. Here are the 5 steps that we're looking to do to put forward in order to control the border. You know, um, he's got that ability to do that. He's got the ability to talk about energy independence, energy production, lowering gas prices. But the thing is, he's got to have a choice. Is he running for reelection for the betterment of this country, or is he going to continue to listen to all the different voices that pop in around him from all these special interests that say, hey, no, it's got to be the Al Gore, the climate change, or Greta, it's a climate change stuff, or the Jane Fondas now, climate change, and other folks are saying, no, 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 your numbers are good on the economy. You created all these jobs and things are great. I mean, that's a choice a campaign's got to make.
Well, it's a policy choice between reality and but one of the other things is you're right on message and you're right on facts, and it's also the feeling. How do people feel? And right now, people feel scared. I think, interest rates are through the roof. It went from 1.8% to over 7%. That's real money if you're trying to buy a house. If you're a young person trying to buy a house, um, the border is an interesting problem for them because they've, starting with do not come from Kamala to, where it exists today with, people. almost literally being helped across the border
Right.
by border guards, and then being shipped into our cities that drain resources that are already scarce, pisses off people who are the core of the Democrat Party. I mean, let's just be honest. One of the things that Joe Biden did was he came up with this executive order that said all federal agencies are allowed to register people to vote. Okay, the reason they did that is, it's not very hard. I mean, we used to do this in Providence. I mean, we came and fixed your sidewalk. Election time comes, we're putting a 4x8 on your lawn sign on your yard. We're not
Yeah.
even asking. The only thing we'll ask is, where do you want us to put it? It's the same thing. You're getting your services, you're getting your free this, you're getting your free that, you're getting subsidized on something. So we want you to vote. The problem now is they've taken all of these people that have come in off the border, sent them into those communities that they had rock solid, and suddenly those new people coming in, who by the way are not registered to vote, are draining the resources that they're using to get these people who are registered to vote for them. And so they put themselves in a bind. And that's why you see over and over again people in the black community, especially in cities across the country, that are royally pissed off at the Biden administration because they're saying, hey, we deserve this stuff, which is a whole nother argument, but we deserve this stuff. This stuff was entitled to us, but now you're giving it to someone else. And I just sit back and look at it and say that's one of the problems he has. That's why his numbers amongst minorities is dropping,
Yeah.
because I think they see that. They also the ones most affected when you go to if you're not getting the handout, if you're actually working, when you get to the store, your dollar doesn't go nearly as far as it used to go. And so that impacts the underserved community or the poor communities as well. They've put themselves in a real quandary in terms of some of their, we call it cross pressures in political campaigns. When you
Right.
do something to help one group that impacts another group that you're supposed to have rock solid, it creates a cross pressure. He's got a few of those going. He's got that going with Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, he does.
I mean, the latest poll in Michigan, which still was bizarre to me, honestly. I think they may have pulled some Canucks from Montreal or something. Had Donald Trump ahead by 10 points in Michigan. They had Donald Trump at 50% in Michigan to Joe Biden's 40%. That's the latest poll that came out. One of the reasons I've got to think is that, the largest Arab American community in the country is in the state of Michigan. And they're not really happy with the position that Joe Biden has taken on the Palestine and Gaza Strip and Hamas. So, I think that's a backlash. I think the unions are a backlash because again, they look at all of these things that, as you said in New York, are supposed to go to teachers, union teachers, that aren't going there because they're now having to give them to illegal immigrants that the federal government is sending to New York. They
Right.
have a lot of cross pressures within that party.
How
But I
much?
will
How
go
much do
ahead.
you think age plays a factor? And I don't mean you've got Biden, who's I believe he's 81 years old or somewhere around there,
Mhm.
or 80, yeah, 80, 81 or 80, 80,
Yeah, I think he's
81,
81.
yeah. Um, and granted, I know that and the Republicans, they do a job of clipping out his his worst gaffes, or when he's it
Right.
looks like he doesn't know where he's going to go. But what's your thoughts on his age, or how people perceive Biden and other folks that are getting themselves, that remain in this arena? So like Jane Fonda just turned, I think she's 86 years old,
Hmm.
and she's going out there to do her own campaign on ending oil production in California. And I was talking to a couple folks, and I'm like, I don't think people are going to listen to her. First of all, I granted I and she just did a movie, The Book Club, or something like that. Someone had to remind me. I'm like, when the hell was the last movie she did? She goes, oh, she did something about Brady and
80
some
for
movie,
Brady.
yeah, and something on a book club or something like that. I'm like, all right, I have no idea. I didn't see any of those, but nonetheless, but it's like how
I
much
didn't.
does age play a factor in folks wanting to listen to them about what they should be doing politically?
again, it depends. When you're talking about a campaign, it could make a big difference. But if one is 80 or 81 and the other he's running against is 78, it's not going to make that big of a difference. I would say to candidates, I would say to Republicans, focus on the things that make a difference to you every day. Talk to people about that, because you can be mean spirited in terms of the age thing without even realizing it because, a lot of people, we have an older generation now. And so we know more people that have the same kind of downward spiral that the president is having. I mean, I think anybody would look at that and admit that. I mean, he's not what he was, 5 years ago,
Right.
which is, no surprise. I mean, that is you take a look at the picture of Obama when he went in and a picture of President Obama when he came out. And, there was a guy that was in great shape. And you could see the aging process for someone who was 40 years younger than Joe is. So that's going to take a toll. People understand that. You don't need to beat that up. What you need to beat up is, you know, 4 years ago you could buy a house and afford it. You can't do that now. 4 years ago you used to be able to go and fill up your car for 25 or 30 bucks. You can't do that now. Those are the kinds of things they need to talk about. I don't know if it's going to play that much of a role because the likelihood is you're going to have, two older folks that are running. But I think what it does do is if Republicans need to get people to focus on the things that impact them every day, that's what's driving his numbers down. Now, let me just throw a caveat into this, if I may. The way, so how do you, if you're on the other side, how do you fix that? If you're a Democrat, how do you fix that? Well, the answer to me is actually pretty simple. It happens the second week of January. You know what happens the second week of January besides the playoffs?
What's
March
that?
for Life. March for Life in Washington, D.C. And, which I've been to a couple of times when I lived in D.C. It's a pretty amazing event. What stunned me was the number of young people that go to that event. But what also is going to happen is what's happened now is economy has risen up in terms of, economy being your safety factor of your ability to have a roof over your head, pay the bills, and everything else has risen up. What the Democrats got to do is flip it to what they know works, which is abortion.
Right.
And I can guarantee you, as we're sitting here, that in the second week of January, when they do March for Life, you're going to have one person trying to overstep another person, trying to overstep another person to espouse how pro-life they are and are going to scare and piss people off. And so, that's where I think you see the Democrats start to go to the thing they know that works, which is the life issue. And the Republicans need to understand you won. You won on the battle. Leave it to the states. Let the states decide. And, stop trying to one up each other to sound draconian and scare the crap out of women voters. That's
Yeah.
what they got to do. They got to focus on the things that affect us every single day, man or woman, Republican or Democrat. Those are the things they got to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And the thing is, it's until his team or himself can get out there and lay out this message. I mean, and they've got to base it with some facts. But I think the most important thing is I think he's got some goodwill with folks where he could just be honest and say, look, things suck, and I get it.
Right.
And I think that would go a long way. I think the honesty factor, I think the acknowledging the things, but as long as he's got his folks out there saying, "Oh no, we've got the border secure," and yet, we see,
Or,
10, 10,000 people kind of crossing in, and it's like, no, it's
yeah.
it's not secure.
Well, or when she stands at the podium and says, "Well, your Thanksgiving dinner is going to be less this year than it was last year." Well, yeah, last year it was 40% more than it was 3 years ago.
Right.
I mean, so, I mean, it's and people know that. That's the problem they have is because people went out and bought the turkey and the stuffing and the cranberry and everything else. They rolled their basket up and they were like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
And so yeah, maybe it was a buck less than it was last year, but it's still $20 more than it was the year 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And they don't understand, maybe they think people are that stupid, and maybe people aren't paying attention like that. But these are issues that they face every day. This is an issue, that pops up and then subside. It's an everyday issue where during the course of the day you're reaching into your pocket to pay more money for something than what it cost 3 years ago. Whether it's energy, whether it's food, whatever. Whether it's insurance, whether it's registering your car, whatever. You're paying more than you were 3 years ago.
Doesn't it
And
doesn't it feel like you're like an ATM machine all the time?
yeah,
It's just like, it's like for one thing you got to pay here, you got to pay this other stuff, and it's like I joke around. I'm like, man, I feel like I'm an ATM machine.
right.
And I want to really hone in on something you said earlier, which is the feeling people have, and that feeling like an ATM. That obviously that's a feeling, but it's the anxiety that goes with it. The anxiety that's being felt by individuals is like, okay, I'm coming toward the end of the month. There's certain amount of days. Okay, I just need to make it to the end of the month so I can get paid again. And it's all those additional costs that pop up. It's the especially during the holidays. You've got,
Mm.
you want to be able to provide your presents over for your family. For your immediate family, your loved ones and stuff. But it's like, okay, well, we got to go to dinner with these folks. Okay, we got to go bring in a dish and things. It just seems as though you're paying out one thing after another, and there's no end in sight, in the sense of you feel like you're alone in this, because you feel that those that are in power, those that are supposed to be honest with you, those are the ones that are, taxing you on it. They're trying to tell you story. They're trying to sell you a story that just isn't true. And
Remember, America is not a democracy. America is a republic. These people are supposed to be representing us, whether it's at the legislative level, the congressional level, the federal level. They're supposed to be representing us. And people need to think about that every time they reach into their pocket and pull out a little more, because the people who represent us are not representing us. And that's where we are right now. And people need to remember that when it comes time
right,
to vote. Are the people that you're voting for representing you every time you have to pull out a little more to get gas, a little more to put heating oil in the tank, a little more to buy chicken, a little more to pay for the food? You got to think about that. Are they really representing you or not? Because America, is a republic. These people are supposed to be representing us. And I think if you looked at it in what we pay and what we get for what we pay, people would say no, they're not.
yeah. Well, we'll
So they
we'll
get
see here.
coal. That's what we're going to do. We're going to send them all coal. That way,
Yeah.
that way, that way, it'll say you've been bad, and it'll piss them off. That's why I'm going to send Greta Thunberg now. I'm going to wrap up a lump of coal and send it to Greta. Here, honey, put this on your tree.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how this. Usually what happens is once we come back from January, you've got a lot of folks that are getting together with their teams over the holiday break. It's a great time of planning for a variety of businesses, and also for campaigns. But once we get toward January 9th, I mean, they've got to have that message honed in and saying, okay, what's the new direction? If we're taking a new direction, what's the new direction, and how are we going to go sell it? Because the primary is coming up very soon, and they're going to have to get the president out there. They're going to have to get his surrogates out there, and we'll end up seeing what that message is.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how they respond, and if they get the message, if they listen to the people. And I mean, I lived there for 6 years. There's a bubble. When people say there's a bubble in Washington, there's a bubble. There's no doubt about that. I saw it every single day, which is why I don't like going to Washington, because they lose contact with reality of what's going on in the real world. Maybe coming home, they'll get a taste of that reality.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. But then they go back into the bubble. So what they ought to do is move the capital from D.C. to Topeka, Kansas. Then anybody that really wants to serve in government would have to move to Topeka, Kansas, and then you'd have people wanted to serve, as opposed to D.C.
Yeah.
But that's just
All
me.
right, Mike. Well, Merry Christmas, Mike, and
Merry Christmas,
we'll
everybody.
talk to you soon. All right, take care.
Take care.